first speaker is Isvtán Svékely, who is Hungarian, and he's been with the European Commission since 2007. Currently, he's with the Directorate General for Economic and Financial Affairs of the European Commission. He is the Director of Economies for 9 member states. Before joining the Commission, he worked as Mission Chief at the International Monetary Fund. He also served as General Manager and Advisor to the Governor of the National Bank of Hungary. And István's topic is on the social developments in Ireland at the time of fiscal consolidation and challenges ahead.
First of all, thank you very much for inviting me, and thank you very much for coming here today. As Sean already mentioned, I mean, we are at a special time when Ireland is about to very successfully exit a adjustment program which was also supported by the European Union and the IMF. So it's a natural time to look a little bit back, but then look forward and see, where do we go from here? Unsustainable growth, that which naturally led to a sharp adjustment, as shown in this chart, which is a general phenomenon actually throughout Europe and in other program countries. What is special about Ireland is that very quickly managed to limit the decline and started to climb back, and much earlier than the others. We'll come to the issue of why this happened. And also markets saw the situation and public finances unsustainable. So at the time when the country entered the program, spreads on government securities were already rather high. And then you remember that period when Europe went through a very difficult crisis. Markets were very pessimistic about the whole region, including countries in vulnerable situation. But I think what this chart also shows that by now, actually, you are back to normal, showing enormous strength also in the market. So the program basically had several kind of areas and goals. But if you want to summarize it in one sentence, what the program tried to achieve is just to bring things back to normal. And I think things are back to normal. But, of course, any such major adjustment leads to important impact on different parts of society. And what this chart shows is that what we do in the paper, actually, if you have time to read it, we try to show the performance of Ireland relative to countries that are at similar level of income, similar openness, similar size. So in a way, a natural benchmark group for Ireland. And what we see there is that before the crisis, the Irish economy was characterized by very low unemployment. I mean, very low by European standards, but even international standards, very decent. And then came a huge shock which led to a rapid increase in unemployment, much more than in other countries of similar characteristics in Europe. So there was an enormous shock to the system, to the labor market, but also to the social support system. And I think the question is how the economy, how the social support system, how society dealt with this shock. So what is the performance on this relative to the situation, or given the circumstances? And what we see here is that, of course, relative to this group, unemployment went up very high. But if we take other countries in similar situation, other vulnerable countries that also went into economic adjustment programs, then what we see is that Ireland managed to limit the increase and in fact started to reduce, while other countries are still coping with the shock. So again, if you want to see how Ireland compares with countries in similar situation, unemployment is very high and still a lot needs to be done to reduce, but I think relative to the circumstances, the performances, I think is really remarkable. Of course, when there's a rapid increase in unemployment and the economy goes through such a shock, the first group to suffer or take the brunt of the hit is the young people. And youth unemployment went to as high as close to or above 30%, which is very high. And of course, much higher than in the benchmark groups and much higher than what is happened in overall in the euro area. And within this, within unemployment, also long-term unemployment increased significantly. And we know that in terms of social implications, in terms of impact on long-term growth, these are the two types of unemployment that are most harmful and the ones that need the most determined action and policy measures in order to reduce them and give a chance to the next generation. I have two kids who are just about to start their own kind of career, their own lives, so I fully understand, and they are in a country which also went through a large shock. I understand how difficult it is when you have to actually, try to find a job in this environment, but how important it is to do find one. So, of course, unemployment, we know that it is the number one reason and cause of social inequality, increasing inequality, and increase in social exclusion and poverty. And on the left-hand side, you see, again, Ireland against some of the other countries. And what you see is a fairly sizable increase in what we call at risk of poverty and social exclusion. This is a combination of different kind of measures, which basically measures the relative income of an individual, also what we call material deprivation, so not having the financial means to purchase certain goods or services that we regard as basic for everyone, and also being in a household where work intensity is very low, so very few members of the household work for a short period. There's a certain definition of what that means. And what we see here is a significant increase. It's on the left-hand side. What we see on the right-hand side, though, is that it is not so much because of income distribution getting more skewed. In fact, your Gini coefficient remained, at least as it is in the statistics, remained fairly stable. So what we see on the left-hand chart, an increase, is almost entirely due to reduction in work intensity, so increase in unemployment. And households where it was highly concentrated, so either no one in the household had a stable job or any longer spell in the labor market, or very few of them for very short periods. And the other important thing about the Irish, how the system coped with this shock, is that the effectiveness of your social transfers actually started to increase, so the system was improved, and during the crisis when the system was really needed, it proved to be fairly efficient. So what this chart shows, the green line is Ireland, is the difference between those at risk of poverty, so below 60% of the average income, roughly speaking, before and after transfers. So the question is how much the transfer itself could correct for the income distribution fact. And what you see here is that, in fact, your system, when it was needed, performed rather well, much better than in the benchmark group countries. So with all the criticism, and I think there are several problems still with the system, and I'm sure that Robert and his colleagues will work hard to improve further the system. Again, what we see here is a decent performance of the social support system. And it's not to deny problems, and I think we had several meetings with Sean, Father Sean, and the other organizations, St. Vincent Society, the European Poverty Network, to understand and see how this in reality in the field it looks like. So it's not to deny problems. All I'm saying here is that relative to other countries, relative to other similar systems in Europe, the performance was relatively good. And now we come to the issue of, what was the impact of what the government did and fiscal consolidation, which was a key component of the program. I think it's an important question, and this question was very frequently asked to us, and we were reminded of the importance of this in our regular meetings. Let me say just two things about this before we get to the numbers. First, that how the program worked. The program was an agreement with the authorities and the international partners about the path of the fiscal adjustment. But it was always for the Irish side, the Irish authorities, to define the measures to achieve that. And I think if we think about why the Irish program was so successful, I think the number one reason, in my view, was the very strong ownership on the part of the authorities and on the part of the democratic institutions in the country. So in a way, we are presenting these numbers and observing the facts, but it is really for your elected officials and parliament to think about this, and if you want to change things about this, to change it. But what we can say, given the numbers, is that actually any study we are aware of that takes into account all the measures, or at least a large number of them, and uses a sort of model-based approach which allows you to take into account all the facts of these measures, then the distribution across different kind of income deciles. Here you have on the right-hand side the richest 10%, on the left-hand side the poorest 10%. Then it's actually fairly progressive, with some irregularities in between, but I think it's fairly progressive. And if you take another kind of measure of the whole thing, what you see is that the 5 budgets since the crisis started, overall, again, you have the highest income group on the right-hand side and the lowest on the left-hand side. It's pretty progressive. So indeed, those who had... It also shows the 2013 budget, which is slightly different in characteristics, but again, it's not for us to judge, it's not for us to pass opinion about this, it is for you and for your elected officials. But what I could point out as that what you have to do is to look into the overall adjustment, because the sequencing of different measures depends on a lot of different factors. So just to give you one example, I think it was a very good measure early on to tackle public sector wage costs and the agreement, the famous Croke Park, actually we are at Croke Park agreement. And that was actually very progressive, and it's good that it happened early on. And then, there was a second agreement, but you can't do this every year. So there is a natural sequencing of measures, and I think what matters is the overall, adjustment over the entire period. And in this respect, again, I would say that as an observer, I can say this is a fairly decent performance in terms of, how progressive it is. But again, this is for you to judge. But let's look into the future a little bit, and I think that's much more important. I think Ireland is very well positioned to offer a wonderful future for young people. First of all, because your young people are very well trained. This chart shows the share of people with university degree completed a tertiary education in the age group of 30 to 34. This is important because that's the age group in the labor market which is kind of really fully established. And you have the highest ratio of these people, much higher than the average and much higher than some of the other countries in similar situation. So you have an extremely well-trained labor force. And also the quality and the structure of the degrees in different subjects is something which is very conducive to growth. But also overall measure of competitiveness, Ireland is ranking very well. Here it shows one of the most comprehensive measure which places Ireland at the 28th place, but in fact, if you look into why this, is this number, or why this, this ranking, then you see that the macroeconomic imbalances are still playing an important role here. So in a few years' times, this will be corrected in the statistics, and then you will come to the top 20, where Ireland always is in terms of competitiveness, which is, again, a very good position to be in. And in terms of, supportive environment for business, the ease with which one can do business, Ireland is always around the top 10. So you have good, well-trained labor force, a very conducive environment to growth, and you restored your cost competitiveness during this adjustment period. So the economy is very well positioned for a strong recovery at some point, especially if the external environment becomes more supportive. So what are the challenges ahead? Obviously, every country needs to strengthen further competitiveness, if not for other reasons, because the other countries are also doing this. So, not improving further means relative to the others, a country can very quickly erode its position. Foster growth, which again comes to certain government policies that make it even easier for people to establish business, and of course the rehabilitation of the banking sector sooner or later will provide an additional support. But for us, the key area in terms of challenges ahead is to significantly reduce long-term and youth unemployment, which requires active labor market policies in, I think, more efficient and more cost-effective policies in this area, and provide tailor-made support to people, particularly to young people, particularly to long-term unemployed people, which includes reskilling, training, upskilling of people trying to re-enter the labor market, and of course help and support job creation. So what is the European Commission and the European Union is doing to help Ireland and other countries in the European Union? I'm just listing here very quickly. I will not explain all of them because then I would need another half an hour. But there are a number of major initiatives, particularly what I would like to call your attention, because you are coming from an important NGO in this area, the Youth Guarantee Scheme, which the Council just passed a recommendation for member states to create this, which is an important initiative, and it comes from the Nordic countries, which actually have this in place this for over a decade in some cases, and turn out to be a very cost-effective and very efficient way of helping young people to enter the labor market and integrate into the labor market faster and getting better jobs, stable, well-paying jobs. And behind this there is what we call the Youth Employment Initiative, which provides funds from European budget, the common budget of the European Union, to this purpose, which is actually quite significant relative to what these schemes cost. So I would strongly encourage you to look into how you can participate this, because it has a very wide participation, including for NGOs and civil society. And of course, in the European semester, which Ireland will now, after exiting the program, will enter and will receive what we call country-specific recommendations from the Union, for member states, from other member states. Obviously, we'll focus on this area, which is a key area for us. I think what this chart shows is that the cost of setting up this youth initiative, as estimated by the ILO, relative to the losses the Irish society has to accept as a result of people being NEET is a concept of people who are neither in work or nor in education or training, vocational training or any other training, is about 2.75% of GDP. That's how much you lose by not tackling this problem. Of course, it's very difficult to entirely eradicate this problem, but if you could just, half, that would be a major boost to the Irish economy. So it's an investment well worth making, because the return on this is rather high. So what the Commission does here, and I just wanted to call your attention because I think for you, and I'm sure you are already aware of this, Director General for Employment is managing the European Social Fund, which is the #1 vehicle to provide the financial support to all these initiatives. And this is a not insignificant part of the overall budget, and the beneficiaries are actually exactly those groups that were hit worst during the crisis. So among them, people younger than the age of 25, which about 3.2 million people in the Union is getting direct support through this fund. And finally, let me mention another important kind of reaction of the European surveillance system to the better understanding of the social implications of economic adjustment and economic crisis. In the macroeconomic imbalances procedure, which so far had a focus on macroeconomics and the indicators, now we have a separate block which looks into the social indicators and the social imbalances and the interaction between economic imbalances and social imbalances. So in our surveillance process now, there is actually a clear attention to this, and we try to understand this important relationship better so that we can factor that into our policy advice. So that's how much I can offer you. Thank you very much again, and it's wonderful to be back in such a sunny day in Dublin.